I know from a change management point of view, you have, say, a change strategy that you might be developing. And some AI tools are now starting to produce strategies.
Yes.
If you're working with a team, Ali, and your team member might be drafting a strategy or drafting something for you, and then they would give it to you and you would provide them feedback. And that's how they would learn from an expert such as yourself, Ali. They would, I'm sure, contribute to the ideas that you have in the final result. But what happens when that drafting is done by AI and these more junior people are no longer given that learning opportunity?
Welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast, where my guests and I explore the multi-layers of managing organizational change. I am Ali Jama, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Monique Zytnik, an author, a communication thought leader with decades of experience in marketing and communications. A seasoned, passionate professional about internal communications, Monique has worked with some of Australia's leading organisations, from major banks to both federal and state governments. In this episode, Monique and I dive into the timely topics of internal communication and diverging into the transformative role of AI in reshaping our craft with some insightful and curious questions to raise. I am grateful to have Monique chatting with me today. Well, Monique, thank you very much for joining me in the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am thoroughly grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you. And you are now in Berlin.
I am. I've just moved across from Melbourne about less than 2 months ago and settling into a new city and also new role.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Before we jump into the topic, today's topic is about internal communications, and we're going to talk about that in context within communicating change management. And also we're going to touch on the technology aspects and as enablers for us in the communication space. But before we start, Monique, it would be fantastic for you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Thank you, Ali. So I'm Monique Zytnik. I'm an internal communications professional, and my current role is as regional lead and executive advisor for the Open Communication Group. We're a global internal communications consultancy, and as an internal communications professional, it's my role to help organisations communicate with their people, whether the people are the CEO and making sure that that information flow goes upwards, or across all areas of the business, including frontline staff. So we're the people who partner with the change managers to make sure that change is brought to life, that there's adoption, and that the people are brought on the journey, and the people in the organisation are the most important thing here.
That will keep you busy, Monique.
Absolutely. And just a little bit about my background. I originally started as a physiotherapist, and I loved the science of it, the measurement, but very quickly realised that it was actually the persuasion part of the role that was the most important. I could actually pick the day that my patients decided to get better. They would start doing their exercises. They would start to think differently. And so I actually studied public relations. I did a postgrad and started working, and we both worked at the same place, I believe, Ali, at Australian Unity. And I had a couple of other roles, and then did my master's and discovered internal communication. And internal communication is something that I'm really passionate about, and to the point of actually being in the middle of, or hopefully near the end of, writing a book on strategic internal communication in an age of artificial intelligence.
Fantastic. That is a worthwhile project. Anybody that can write a book, I can take my hat off for them. It takes a lot of effort, energy, and emotions to get a product like that.
It does, but fortunately, I'm a part of the International Association of Business Communicators, and we have an amazing network. And just the other day, I put out a call out for a couple more case studies, and just got so many responses from the community globally to step in and share their knowledge as well, which gives me a warm heart and a happy smile.
I want to ask you about internal communication as an art, as a profession, as a capability. The world nowadays is dynamic. Everything is moving fast. Things are changing. Assumptions are being challenged every day. And people in the workplace, they expect more with all the things happening around the world. What are some of the challenges that we have nowadays for internal communications team?
Well, it's a really interesting environment at the moment because you've got a lot more hybrid work, and there's organisations who have typically relied on culture being at the water cooler, and you need to take a different approach to bring culture to life in a hybrid environment. And on top of that, as you said, there's a lot more change that employees are working with. We've also got various economic downturns that are happening globally in different spots of the world a little bit more intensely than others. And so there's been layoffs and a lot of trust broken with employees, yes, between the employer and employee, I think partially as a result of not the greatest internal communication. And in terms of challenges for internal communications, I wouldn't say it's necessarily challenge. Like any profession, we need to move with the times and shift and change. There's been a big shift in the past year, I'd say, specifically from being the order takers and the doers to more of a strategic role. And that appreciation, I think, has become partially because content is starting to become a little bit cheap with the whole technology changes such as generative AI. And there's a chance of overwhelming employees with too much content at the moment if that strategic focus isn't there.
I want to touch on that topic. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, it's okay, Ali.
I want to touch on the topic of trust. I've got this theory in my head, and maybe it's not a theory, but maybe you can validate it for me, or hypothesis, is that the media nowadays, we don't have a lot of trust in the media. And I think that is translated into the workplace. We do see sometimes the internal comms as a group of people that work with the executive teams and management teams, and therefore we know that whatever they communicate has been spun in a way. Is that where the lack of trust is coming from?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because there's some recent research that was actually released just a couple of weeks ago in the UK. It's the Institute of Internal Communications, where they surveyed 3,000 employees to look at this issue. And it actually found that organisations that have an internal communications team actually have higher trust and engagement within the workforce. And one would presume that that's because the internal communications people are practicing best practice and are helping the organisation. In terms of being the spin doctors, the attitude towards internal communications from a practitioner side has really changed a lot more to promoting authenticity and trying to be open and honest with employees about the change and what is happening in the organisation and what they're going to expect and what kind of implications that will have on them. So a good internal communications advisor would be the trusted advisor of the CEO and help the CEO understand that they can't greenwash or whitewash away all their problems, and that to plan it out, to have honest conversations will actually get the results in the end. So it's almost like the little gremlin on the shoulder is the internal comms person who is asking all the difficult questions before communicating with staff happens.
This is provided that they actually move away from taking orders to playing an effective role as somebody that equal at the table, understanding the internal audience, probably the eyes and ears of the senior management, and also they are the conscience of the leaders. Absolutely. When it comes to sharing messages with authenticity, knowing that the end game is a trust. And when you have trust, obviously, it's got implications on employee engagement and all of those things.
Absolutely. And the thing that we need to remember is the ultimate outcome are positive business outcomes. And the number one role of the internal communications professional is to understand their audience, whether the audience is the frontline staff, whether the audience is the senior leadership team, whether the audience is actually the CEO and information is being passed up to the CEO. And with that, it's with that understanding then being strategic in how you go about communicating with them in an effective way. And that means not only talking and sending messages, but primarily listening. There is so much that's to be gained from listening and, again, feeding that information back to the CEO and constantly building that relationship with the different target audiences on behalf of the organisation. And as you said, that trust. There's a lot of research that shows that there is a lot of break in trust at the moment. If you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, that's was released in January. It's released annually. Also, the IOIC report that I just mentioned. It's at the moment there's a lot more trust with the direct managers at the moment, and a lot of broken trust within organisations.
I want to share with you my personal view. I've worked on a lot of projects and many organizations, and I always come across a couple of types of internal comms and teams and their mindset. Sometimes they are actually, and sometimes they are gatekeepers, and sometimes they play you as your trusted advisor. In fact, they cheer you up. In fact, they don't change the whole essence of your message, but then obviously because they're deeply engaged in the organization, they can offer valid advice. Is that your observation as well?
Yes, well, like any profession, not everybody's perfect.
Sure.
And a good internal communications professional should be understanding you, Ali, as their client and understanding your motivations and being able to work with you through business problems and look at ways that communication can help support your goals and solve those business problems. And it's really a partnership. And that's why I quite often get frustrated when I see organisations who have a very junior internal comms person who is supporting a senior leader, and that's not fair. That's an order taker. Whereas I think there is something to be said for the craft and the profession and being mentored and guided through by more senior practitioners. For example, stakeholder management is another important skill, and one of my direct reports last year, she was absolutely gorgeous, but she was new to a particular stakeholder group, and as her manager, I guided her. We prepped for the meetings with the stakeholders, tried to work out where each of them were coming from, worked out the goals of the meeting, and then she would go into the meeting and manage the meeting. And I would be there just to jump in if needed, but deliberately stepping back so that she was seen as leading. And then after the meeting, being there to debrief, to provide some tips and prepare for the next one. So it's this kind of attentive, supportive management that from a senior leader who can really help the more junior people grow, putting them in positions of reporting to a C-suite without the skills and experience is a recipe for disaster and a recipe for order taking and bad internal communications.
Yeah, well, status and status can be daunting for a new person, and that's always the challenge, obviously. What I do with internal comms, wherever I go, I respect that they've got a job to do. So what I do, Monique, is I deal with them like any other stakeholder group. I go out of my way to engage them and brief them continuously about what I'm working on. And rather than an afterthought, I don't consider them as an afterthought. And I always share with them, even though they're actually busy, but I work always in an environment where there's a lot of change and a change delivery space in technology especially. And so it's in my best interest to get them excited about the work we're doing, but also ask for their advice. And in that way, then we all win. The winning for us is that our people really understand what's happening with the organization and feel safe about those changes as well.
Ali, you sound like the ideal client, and I'm sure you've got plenty of internal comms people after this podcast lining up to work with you.
Yeah, well, I work with, currently I'm working with very smart people, and I respect their job. I know that I'm probably more experienced than a lot of people that I work with in the internal comms. However, they are experienced in the organization they work in, and therefore, as I consult to businesses and contract, I gotta have to respect that because they give me insight, and that insight is very valuable for somebody like me. And again, as I said always, the aim of change is that people adopt the change and the experience is positive, and it's up to me, internal comms, the senior leadership group, the sponsors, all of these people. It takes a whole organization to make something really tangible and positive as well. So it's not really an easy thing. So I do respect that with them. I want to ask you about what are some of the things that from your observation, internal comms teams do that you think they need to change the game, knowing where we are in the change economy nowadays?
I think that the awkward answer is it depends. It depends on the organisation and where they're placed. We've had a lot of growth and change in the profession in the past year, and it would be unfair to ask a team who are squirreled away with not much support from senior leaders to be driving a racing car, so to speak.
Yeah.
So for internal communications teams, what I see right now is the need to play with technology. I think that's the hottest topic at the moment with the environment that we're in, with AI and generative AI, with all of the digital workplaces, understanding the tools, focusing on working with HR and IT on a really good channel strategy. These are a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with clients at the moment is post-COVID, or during the COVID, they've dumped a lot of new tools and channels on the employees. And now there's general confusion as to which, do I jabber someone, or do I call them on Teams, or do I pick up the phone, or how do, this is the confusion that the employees are feeling, that we're hearing. And there's some appalling results that have just come out from a sweep report where I think it was, they looked at, I can't remember how many thousands of employees' use of Teams, Microsoft Teams, and found out that only 24% actually use the channels. So the collaboration tool within Teams, which is the channels, only 24% of the employees were using this feature. So The long answer is technology.
Yes.
And again, number one, going back to premise one, know your audience. So spending time reconnecting and focusing and making sure that you understand where your different target audience groups are at mentally at the moment. So as I mentioned, with hybrid work in Australia, there's still a lot of friction about whether people work in the office or and I don't think it's only Australia, sort of the amounts that they work in the office. There's also the frontline staff. We've done some audits at Open Communication Group where, for example, they've got minimal, some organisations, the frontline staff have got minimal use of technology, and their pain points are super basic in that they can't even get access to their rosters and things like that. And understanding each of these groups that are within your organisation and understanding your organisation is still the primary thing. So they're the two big tips that I would give internal comms team. And then obviously the third one would be look after your staff.
Yeah.
Look after your team, help them grow.
I want to shift gear and talk about the tools, the toys nowadays, generative AI. You did talk also around that we do have some technology, but we don't optimize the usage of that technology, which is like Teams and all of that. Well, first of all, let's just agree on one thing. As a starting point, lots of people see AI as a threat. I see it as an opportunity like any other thing. What's your take on that?
I see it as inevitable, and I see that it's helpful. I mean, I use it personally for auto translates and things like that. My biggest concern right now, Ali, is technology inequality. So these tools mean that some people are able to write reports faster. They record meeting messages. Some people I know have got access to Microsoft Copilot, and it spits out the summary of a meeting very accurately in a matter of seconds. So there are these super helpful tools that there are people jumping on board who want to use them, who are comfortable using them. And then there are, I know executives who even this year are getting their EAs to print out presentations, and then they will be presented online, the presentation, but they'll have the hard copy in front of them on the desk and be leafing through them and not comfortable, particularly with interacting overly in a digital environment or entirely in a digital environment. And I also had last year, it was an internal client who returned a Word document to me because she didn't know how to accept the track changes on a Word document. So that concerns me. And I think this is the biggest thing that is coming internal communications way is adoption of not only generative AI and other AI tools, but technology more broadly. And I've just submitted a chapter to a Quadriga University book on helping colleagues become comfortable with generative AI.
So what you're saying here is that your concern is around that the technology is already moving very fast and we're a little bit behind. We're always going to be behind anyway, but at least how much behind, that's what you're actually talking about in here. And we're going to have to look seriously now at technology as an enabler and saving time and freeing up ourselves to really be creative and thinking about stuff. Is that where you're going with this?
Absolutely. It's at an interesting point where the technology and the different AI tools aren't yet perfect. So there are still bumps in the road. So we can't be too idealistic at this point in time. But there's a lot of talk as well about AI reducing or basically making knowledge equality So while while there might be technology inequality, there might be knowledge equality. So people who were typically smart, typically well informed, typically maybe with university degrees, other people who haven't had those opportunities are able to access the same information at the click of a finger. So the ideal scenario would be that you would be able to ask these generative AI or these different tools a question about your organization, and it would give you an answer in the same way as if you asked one of your knowledgeable colleagues.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting position that we're in at the moment, and nobody really quite knows how fast these bumps will be removed from the technology experience, because obviously the friction is a problem to adoption, and nobody really quite knows. We can all see that there are key industries, and I'm just trying to remember which report it was, but definitely marketing and communications, sales, and there's other industries as well to do with research who are going to be significantly impacted by this technology. From the communications industry, that would be obviously content generation and the speed at which that can be done.
How do you use it yourself, Monique?
So me personally, I use things like the language translate function in Microsoft products. Because we deal with confidential client information, I'm very cautious about using external things like ChatGPT, and also using things like DeepL I'm very cautious about what I put into those programs. Obviously, there's the Samsung case.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the Samsung case from March, I think it was, this year. But I do use ChatGPT for idea generation sometimes if I'm feeling stuck. And sometimes some of the visual tools, I think it's Leonardo. If I can share a very amusing example,
Sure.
within our company, we've got a group of people who are the early adopters, and they've started playing with these tools. We've got designers, we've got video experts, and the like in our consultancy. And Keith, one of our designers, made an entire video from using various AI tools, and that included the voiceover, that included the script generation, that included the visuals thing, and it was really interesting, because on the first look, when all of my colleagues and I saw this video, like there were people. Keith's in Johannesburg. When we first saw this video, it was like, oh, here's a little video about internal communications. Oh, that's interesting. It's all been done by AI. But then when you actually delve into it and look closely, the content was actually rubbish, and we like the actual content was very bland, and there were really weird things. And Keith had taken a screenshot of it, of where someone's arm was blended into the table. And there was some really, really, when you actually looked closely, it was very, yeah, we were all laughing. And so, and the voice was still quite mechanical. And these are all things that can potentially be improved over time as the technology improves. But the thing is, and this is the key message to all of the people out there, you need to know what a good video looks like. You need to know what a good message looks like. You need to know what good communication looks like so that you can fix it. Because if you accept what is spit out from these tools without that understanding, you risk spamming staff, you risk spamming other people with content that's really not going to hit them up.
Yes.
And because, Keith was a graphic designer and he did this from an experimental point of view, we got this initially okay looking thing, but it was actually pretty rubbish and uninspiring piece of content coming out. It's where if in an organisation there weren't any skilled communication professionals, that I would be worried that content would be let loose on staff.
Absolutely. And I never believed that the technology will replace internal teams and all of these people, because you still need them. They've got the internal knowledge that, put it that way, a technology is as good as the input, and how much can you put into that. Personally, I use it for two reasons. I think one of them is to validate my thinking around certain ideas and approaches. Unlike you, I am cognizant of the fact it's an open source, so I don't put any of my clients' information in there. And the second one is it generates some new ideas, just in case I haven't thought about that. I do reach out to technology to think about. Recently, I'm researching how I can assess a group sentiment about a change, and that I can compile a lot of information. So I'm testing this. I'm putting a lot of dummy data into there and see the amount of information it can give me. I'm also using it even for my podcast. I'm putting all my episodes and trying to get AI to analyze all the key themes that are actually missing from my podcast. So it can be very powerful.
Absolutely. And the other question that I haven't yet answered is, I know from a change management point of view, you have, say, a change strategy that you might be developing. And some AI tools are now starting to produce strategies.
Yes.
If you're working with a team, Ali, and your team member might be drafting a strategy or drafting something for you, and then they would give it to you and you would provide them feedback, and that's how they would learn from an expert such as yourself, Ali. They would, I'm sure, contribute to the ideas that you have in the final result. But what happens when that drafting is done by AI and these more junior people are no longer given that learning opportunity? Now, I'm thinking of myself where, say, for example, a junior person might draft a news article for me, and then I would spend maybe half an hour reviewing it, showing them where different, focusing on this key angle, let's tone this down, let's use this other language, and then giving it back to them, and that's how they would learn the craft. If AI can do that for me, then how do we look after the learning of our more junior people who no longer have those opportunities? And that's an answer I haven't yet come to, and I'm curious to your thoughts on that as well. I don't know that this current technology environment has really considered the implications of professions such as yours and mine, where a lot of the learning comes from experience.
About 3 months ago, we had this conversation with a couple of people, and the conversation was around, can anybody do my job? And I say, absolutely, anybody can do my job. But there's only my mind, and there's only one unique mind that I have. And that unique mind, nobody can have. So anybody can can learn soccer, a game, and then they go and play it. But not everybody can be a Messi. Because there's always people that take it to a different level. So the advantage that you and I have got now is that we've got the normal long years of experience, and now technology is making some stuff easier for us. Remember, in the old days, there was no Word and Microsoft and all of that. We used to do all of those things. So we are able to capitalize on technology, but we have our what I call operational wisdom as on top of what we actually look at. at some stage, that operational wisdom is not going to be there. It's going to be purely based on technology. It's going to be a transitional period, and you and I are in the transition now, so we're in a lucky space. It is very hard to answer this question. I am hoping that technology will be far better when such a time will come, because there's going to be a huge shift for companies to actually move towards that technology. It is going to be a challenge. I'm hoping that through podcasts like these that we have nowadays, and you've got your own podcast, Monique, we can spread the message that operational wisdom, this is the difference between somebody who will just do the stuff and somebody that will think about the stuff. This is the difference between somebody rolling out a change and finishing it, and somebody focusing on the change is not the goal. The goal is the goal. And so these are the subtle differences when you look at where we are now, but it is going to be a challenge going forward. That, I don't know what you call it, but I call it my operational wisdom.
I love that term. And Ali, that's one of the things that motivated me to write this book on strategic internal communications in an age of artificial intelligence, because the book is actually designed for leaders and to help them understand and know what a good strategy looks like, so that the people with the budget, the senior leaders, and hopefully also the more junior people who are still learning this operational knowledge have a simple model to help them know, have they covered off all the key elements of a good communication strategy? Have they got the listening? Have they got the measurement? Have they got the community engagement? And have they got that immersive communication for the more tricky pieces? So it's something that's definitely been on my mind. And I don't think as a profession we've worked out how that organisational knowledge transfer can best work in the new environment. And that's one of the things that I would love for anyone listening to this podcast to take a think about, and please reach out as well for a discussion, because it is forefront of my mind.
Absolutely. And I hope that people will listen to this, and if there's anything that we can help with, and is for them to maybe, if we raise a question mark for them to think about, that will be really a successful outcome for this podcast. Thoroughly enjoying this conversation, Monique. I would like to ask you about, we are coming close to the podcast. What would be the 3 takeaways that you would like our listeners, especially in the change and the communication space, to think about?
Number 1 is for all of the change managers out there, your internal communications person is there to help you succeed and help your project to succeed, and to bring you ideas, think of different directions that things could take, and most importantly, bring a knowledge and understanding of your audience to the table so that you can make the best decisions. And I think that's really, Ali, that's the number 1 message that I would love your listeners to take away is your internal communications professional is there to support, help you be successful.
Fantastic.
Also, having a strategy, and that means having the right ways of engaging with the different target audiences. For example, email is still one of the most preferred. You wouldn't have thought it, and I was hoping it would die, but email is still one of the preferred channels for staff receiving content, but you need to mix that with different ways of reaching, providing the right context, so more sensitive things being discussed face-to-face or at least on a video, and then building the message and not just launching your change project, but actually taking it through afterwards so that people still continue to make sense. People still are on board and adopting the change and staying with it rather than it being a blip in the organisational schedule.
Yeah, I always say, Monique, it's the same message, different ways and different channels. That's the only way probably that can help, not all of them, but at least a good majority of them to to understand it and stick to it. One email is not going to cut it. One message is not going to cut it. There's an avalanche of information coming our way every day. And I've got a feeling that we are holding on to email as a legacy at some stage, probably the chat. I do more work nowadays through the chat channels than emails. I find it faster, friendlier, and takes less time from me, and people seem to be engaged in it. And there's always going to be a couple of people saying, can you send it to me in an email? But I think this is a legacy feeling, but that's just my view anyway.
I think that's a really interesting question, because I was hoping that email would die. And even when I was back at Australian Unity 2010 and implementing the new SharePoint intranet 2010, I can't believe it. And there was all this talk about email dying, and that people would go to the homepage for the news and it wouldn't be sent around. And we actually succeeded that. I do believe we managed to kill the all staff newsletter, but there were still all staff emails that went out, and a lot of organisations that I've seen since, unfortunately, can't seem to get rid of the all staff email, just because there is that preference. And I think a lot of people will need to leave the workforce before we can say goodbye to email, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. But like any other thing, is we're just going to have to put up with it now. I am grateful for your time, Monique. How would people reach you?
Well, LinkedIn's always great. And no matter where you are in the world, there's whatever phone number you might have.
I am very happy with
LinkedIn's
LinkedIn, I tell you that.
So if they just look up Monique Zytnik, Zytnik, I do believe I'm the only one.
Excellent. The only Monique Zytnik in the world. So I'm going to put all your information, Monique, in the podcast information. I'm grateful for your time today. I'm really happy that we finally connected and tackled this particular important topic. And I wish you all the best in your new lifestyle, new venture, and also wish you all the best in the book as well. And I look forward to reading it. And I hope to get you back in the future at some stage to tackle another topic around internal comms. And hopefully by that time, email has died.
One can only hope. Thank you so much, Ali. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and the exchange of ideas. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you very much. Until next time, Monique, stay well and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode valuable, remember to subscribe to stay updated on upcoming episodes. Your support is truly appreciated. And by sharing this podcast with your colleagues, friends, and fellow change practitioners, it can help me reach even more individuals and professionals who can benefit from these discussions. Remember, and in my opinion, change is an enduring force, and you will only have a measure of certainty and control when you embrace it. Until next time, thank you for being part of the Inner Game of Change community. I am Ali Jama, and this is the Inner Game of Change podcast.